Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My dear students of second year MBBS, the boys and girls, मैं आपसे इसलिए मुखातिब हूँ कि आज जो लेक्चर मैंने अभी अपलोड किया है उसमें आपको बहुत सारी रेपिटिशन मिलेगी। मैंने रिवाइज़ किया है बार बार, मैंने हिस्टोलॉजी और ओवरी में बार बार चीज़ों को रिपीट किया है ताकि आपको समझ आ जाए। और ये क्लास का भी यही दस्तूर था, मेरी कोशिश होती थी कि आप जो है वो समझ के उठें। तो चुनाचे मैं आपको ये बता रहा था कि फीमेल रिप्रोडक्टिव सिस्टम में देयर आर द पेयर्स ऑफ ओवरीज, देयर आर जेनिटल डक्ट्स कंसिस्टिंग ऑफ द fallopian tube, and we have got the uterus and the vagina. These are the internal genitalia. And I was talking about the changes in the cortex and the medulla of the ovary. When we cut a section of the ovary, we will find the cortex and the medulla, and in the cortex, in the stroma of the cortex, there are different types of follicles present. In a young female, after the puberty, under the influence of the pituitary hormones, the primordial follicles जो हैं वो सिर्फ छोटी बच्ची में होते हैं। जो एक इमेच्योर फीमेल चाइल्ड है उसमें सिर्फ प्राइमोर्डियल फॉलिकल्स होते हैं, और ये प्राइमोर्डियल फॉलिकल्स जो हैं फिर ये डिवाइड और रीडिवाइड होना शुरू होते हैं। एंड दीज प्राइमोर्डियल फॉलिकल्स विच आर ओनली they have got the oocyte, that is the primary oocyte, which is covered by simple squamous epithelium, and this primordial follicle then it develops into the primary follicle, and then the secondary follicles, and ultimately the Graafian follicle. तो ये सारी कहानी जो है मैंने बार बार रिवाइज़ की है। उम्मीद है कि आप जो है वो माइंड नहीं करेंगे और आप बोर नहीं होंगे। खुदा हाफिज़, जल्दी मिलेंगे। अब मैं आपको दो तीन छोटी छोटी क्लिप्स दिखाता हूँ जिनमें ये सारी प्रोसेस जो है, ये जो प्राइमोर्डियल फॉलिकल से लेकर ग्राफियन फॉलिकल तक और ओव्यूलेशन से लेकर फर्टिलाइजेशन तक का प्रोसेस जो है वो दिखाया जाएगा। और आप जो है वो उसके बाद फिर मैं आपको रिवाइज़ कराऊंगा कि प्राइमोर्डियल फॉलिकल जो हैं वो जब प्राइमरी फॉलिकल में डिवाइड होता है तो उसमें क्या तब्दीलियाँ आती हैं। कुछ तब्दीलियाँ जो हैं वो साइट में आती हैं, कुछ तब्दीलियाँ उसके सराउंडिंग फॉलिकुलर सेल्स में आती हैं, और कुछ तब्दीलियाँ जो हैं उसके इर्द गिर्द जो थीका फॉलिकुलाई की शक्ल में एक कनेक्टिव टिश्यू होता है उसमें आती हैं। तो चुनांचे इनको आप दोबारा देखें।
A primordial follicle consists of an oocyte surrounded by a single layer of squamous granulosa cells. A primordial follicle becomes a primary follicle as the granulosa cells become enlarged and cuboidal. The primary follicle enlarges and the granulosa cells form more than one layer. The zona pellucida forms around the oocyte. The structure is called a secondary follicle when fluid-filled vesicles develop among the granulosa cells and a well-developed capsule, or theca, becomes apparent around the granulosa cells. The theca possesses internal and external layers. The structure is called a mature follicle when the fluid-filled vesicles form a single antrum. At full maturity, the oocyte is located in the cumulus mass. During ovulation, the oocyte is released from the follicle, along with some surrounding granulosa cells of the cumulus mass, called the corona radiata. Following ovulation, the granulosa cells divide rapidly and enlarge to form the yellow corpus luteum. When the corpus luteum degenerates, it forms the white corpus albicans.
Primary oocyte consists of 44 XX chromosomes. It is around 35 microns in diameter. As the follicle undergoes maturation, primary oocyte increases in size and reaches about 140 microns in diameter. the flat follicular cells now becomes cuboidal. Follicular cells multiply to form several layers of cells around the developing primary oocyte. Scattered amorphous material accumulates between the inner layer of follicular cells and the primary oocyte. This glycoprotein-rich material fuses to form a complete striated membrane called as zona pellucida. It is derived from both primary oocyte and follicular cells. Numerous microvilli of the primary oocyte projects into the zona pellucida, where it comes in contact with similar processes of inner layer of follicular cells. It helps in transfer of nutrition to the developing ovum. The multiplication of follicular cells gains pace, and as a result, small spaces appear in between the follicular cells. These spaces fuse with each other, forming antrum folliculi. It is filled with a fluid called as liquor folliculi. The follicular cells which forms the outer layer is called as membrana granulosa. The follicular cells that intervene between the antrum folliculi and zona pellucida is known as cumulus euphoricus or cumulus ovaricus. Those follicular cells that suspend the zona pellucida and developing ovum constitutes the discus proligerus. At the same time, changes take place in the stromal cells of ovary surrounding the developing follicle. These stromal cells organizes to form a sheath known as theca folliculi. Theca folliculi consists of two layers. Theca interna, inner vascular and cellular layer. Theca externa, outer fibrous layer. At this stage, the primary oocyte completes the first meiotic division to form secondary oocyte and first polar body.
Generally, there are three varieties of ovarian follicles representing different stages of follicular development during the menstrual cycle, and they may be seen in the section of an adult ovary. So we will see different types of stages of the follicles in the cortex of the ovary, and these are the primordial follicles, the growing follicles, and there is a mature, that is Graafian follicle. The ovaries of a female child contain only the primordial follicles. As the onset of puberty, the ovarian follicles begin to grow under the influence of gonadotrophic hormones, which are secreted by the pituitary gland. During each menstrual cycle, the number of primordial follicles in both ovaries undergo progressive development. Now these follicles are referred to as the growing follicles. Normally only one growing follicle becomes fully mature and ovulates approximately in the mid of each menstrual cycle, that is at the 14th day of the menstrual cycle. All other growing follicles undergo a degenerative process, and that is called atresia. And the remains of the ovulated follicles are converted into the corpus luteum. So the cortex of an adult ovary contains the growing ovarian follicles and their end products, that is corpora lutea, atretic follicles, and corpora albicans. Structural features of various types of the ovarian follicles, the change in the oocyte and the follicular cells surrounding. As regards the primordial follicle, this follicle consists of an immature ovum, which is actually a primary oocyte, and it is arrested in the prophase stage of the first meiotic division. Oocyte is surrounded by a single layer of latent epithelial cells which are called follicular cells. So this is the primordial follicle. You can see the oocyte which is surrounded by the flat follicular cells. And this ovum measures about 30 microns in diameter and has a large eccentrically situated vesicular nucleus with a very prominent nucleolus. If we talk about the growing follicles, the first stage is the unilaminar primary follicle. You can see the oocyte which is surrounded by a single layer of cuboidal follicular cells. In the growing follicles, three stages. The follicular cells at first increase in height and become cuboidal in shape, which were squamous initially, and at this stage a growing follicle consisting of an ovum surrounded by a single layer of cuboidal follicular cells is known as the primary follicle. This is the primary follicle. And later these follicular cells begin to proliferate. They increase in number by rapid mitotic division and soon gives rise to a stratified layer. ये देख सकते हो. This is multilaminar primary, that is pre-antral follicle. You can see the oocyte which is surrounded by the zona pellucida. Then we have got the stratum granulosum, which is there are many layers of the cuboidal cells. Then the stromal cells of the ovary, that is the cells which are present in the stroma of the cortex. They are further divided into the theca interna and the theca externa. Later the follicular cells begin to proliferate. They increase in number by rapid mitotic division and soon gives rise to a stratified layer around the ovum. Now these follicular cells are referred to as the granulosa cells. The proliferation occurs more rapidly on one side of the ovum so that the follicle becomes ovoid in shape and the ovum assumes an eccentric position. At this stage, the growing ovarian follicle is known as pre-antral follicle. It consists of an ovum surrounded by several 6 to 12 concentric layers of granulosa cells. The granulosa cells are collectively known as the stratum granulosum. This stratum rests on a well-defined basement membrane that separates it from the surrounding ovarian stroma. Later on, there appears between the granulosa cells the spaces which contain a clear fluid which is called the liquor folliculi, which is mainly a transudate of blood plasma, but it is rich in the hyaluronidase and it contains a high concentration of growth factors, the steroids and gonadotrophic hormones. The space between these granulosa cells soon fuse to form a single large crescent-like cavity. So these coalesce to give rise to this crescent-like cavity. This is called the antrum folliculi. The stratum granulosum has relatively uniform thickness except for the region associated with the ovum. In this thickened region of the ovum and the surrounding granulosa cells project into the antrum as the cumulus oophorus. This is the cumulus oophorus. If we talk about the Graafian follicle, you can see the mature Graafian follicle. A mature Graafian follicle reaches a size of 1 centimeter or more and it extends through the full breadth of the ovarian cortex and produces a visible bulge on the surface of the ovary. As you can see, this is the bulge over the ovary. As more and more fluid accumulates, the follicular cavity becomes very large and there is a decrease in the mitotic division of the granulosa cells and consequently the stratum granulosum appears relatively thinner and the mature ovarian follicle ovulates That is, it releases the ovum in the middle of the ovarian cycle.
A primordial follicle consists of an oocyte surrounded by a single layer of squamous granulosa cells. A primordial follicle becomes a primary follicle as the granulosa cells become enlarged and cuboidal. The primary follicle enlarges and the granulosa cells form more than one layer. The zona pellucida forms around the oocyte. The structure is called a secondary follicle when fluid-filled vesicles develop among the granulosa cells and a well-developed capsule, or theca, becomes apparent around the granulosa cells. The theca possesses internal and external layers. The structure is called a mature follicle when the fluid-filled vesicles form a single antrum. At full maturity, the oocyte is located in the cumulus mass. During ovulation, the oocyte is released from the follicle, along with some surrounding granulosa cells of the cumulus mass, called the corona radiata. Following ovulation, the granulosa cells divide rapidly and enlarge to form the yellow corpus luteum. When the corpus luteum degenerates, it forms the white corpus albicans.
Your due date is calculated from the first day of your last menstrual period. Conception occurs about 2 weeks from this day, and that's when you're truly considered to be pregnant. During a menstrual cycle, one of your 2 ovaries matures an egg within a follicle. Hormonal surges controlled by your brain then cause 1 and occasionally 2 follicles to release an egg. If both ovaries release an egg, you may have non-identical twins, also known as fraternal twins. Long, finger-like projections sweep the egg into the fallopian tube. The egg travels down the fallopian tube, pushed by tiny hairs, and awaits the arrival of sperm. About a teaspoon's worth of semen enters the vagina, containing roughly 300 million sperm. Less than 100,000 will pass into the cervix to begin their 6-inch journey to the egg. A long, whip-like tail propels each sperm toward the waiting egg. Most sperm will lose their way. Only about 200 sperm successfully reach the egg. Fertilization occurs when 1 sperm penetrates the egg, combining their genetic material. The sperm and egg each contain 23 chromosomes holding all of the information that determines your child's sex and contributes to the child's genetic makeup, including physical appearance, intelligence, and personality. It's a boy or a girl. You just don't know which yet. Within 24 hours of fertilization, the egg, now called a zygote, divides into 2 cells. The number of cells doubles about every 12 hours as the zygote continues its trek to the uterus. During this early stage, if the cells split into 2 separate groups, instead of remaining attached, you'll be doubly blessed with identical twins. About 3 days after fertilization, the zygote has become a ball of 32 cells resembling a miniature raspberry. A few days later, it reaches the uterus as a ball of roughly 500 cells surrounding a fluid-filled cavity. On day 7, the ball of cells burrows into the uterine wall during a process called implantation. Many women have implantation bleeding or spotting at this time, which occurs about 21 days after a period, before a pregnancy test could even be positive. The cells on the outside of the ball create the yolk sac and the placenta, which nourishes your developing baby. By 38 weeks, the fertilized egg has grown into an infant with more than 2 trillion cells.